Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
How are you doing? You okay?
Super, thank you.
Good.
Okay, so it's 12 o'clock. We've got plenty of people on the call, so I think we'll make a start, and I'll continue to add any additional people joining today. So welcome to today's Insurance Institute of Manchester bite-sized session. These sessions have been created to introduce or refresh knowledge and awareness of specific areas of the insurance industry. We are delighted to have Joe Tracy, UK and EU Cyber Development Manager for CFC, hosting today's session, focused on the fundamentals of cyber risk by exploring why, how, and where losses arise for businesses across the UK as a result of cybercrime. The session will look at key methods criminals use to extort businesses and how businesses can offset such a risk through cyber insurance. So Joe, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be along. As mentioned, I'm Joe Tracy. I look after cyber development at CFC across the UK and EU. I am traditionally from a broking background, so I've been on the side trying to sell cyber insurance face-to-face to businesses, and now sit on the insurance side. So I'm not blind to how difficult of an industry and an insurance line this is, but hopefully I can shed some light in terms of what we see as an insurer and a market-leading insurer, and where losses arise for businesses, how that's done, some of the nice tales around who the cyber criminals are, and then moving on to what looks good in insurance in 2024. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a period for questions at the end, but please feel free to pop anything in the chat as I go through if you can, and I'll try and pick that up as I'm speaking. If you give me a moment, I'll share my screen. So hopefully you can all see that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Reminds me very much of COVID, this. We've been through what we'll cover today, but the overriding feature of what I'm looking to cover is really demystify what cybercrime is, the purpose of cyber insurance, and generally where financial losses arise from businesses. I'd like you to think about cyber insurance and cybercrime very much like traditional crime and losses. Essentially, there's 2 or 3 things that can happen to a business that causes a financial loss. You can offset that in an insurance policy, which have some services around it. And of course, insurers charge a premium for that. It's very much any other line, like any other line of insurance. So always try and look at it through that guise. Without further ado, I just want to introduce CFC a little bit more for those of you that may not be familiar or too familiar with ourselves. We're quite a large organization now. We wrote over $1 billion of premium last year across 20 emerging risk product lines. Cyber accounts for about 60% of what we do globally. We write across 90 territories, have over 900 employees now, and 130,000 clients, and were founded in 1999. There's a reason I am telling you these figures. It isn't a humble brag about CFC. It plays a major part into what we can see in cyber insurance, cyber risk, how we model cyber risk, and where we've ended up now in 2024. As you can see by that 1999 figure, cyber insurance is often viewed as very new. In fact, it's not. Cyber risk has been around for generations. However, the magnitude and the severity of it has changed drastically, and no more so probably in the last 5 or 10 years. When you're looking at businesses, cyber financial risk, if not the largest, it will be the second largest financial risk a business faces, and it's certainly enough to close a business overnight if they aren't risk managed properly and or have a sturdy insurance policy that sits behind them. So if you're not sure who CFC are, please have a look at our website. We've got loads of good collateral on there, both for cyber and other product lines. I've mentioned 20 other product lines, and please use our resources as much as you can. When we're looking at cyber insurance, I find the easiest way, or cyber risk, to cut it into 3 silos or 3 pillars, as I typically call them. when you're looking to transfer risk in the cyber world, what three things should you look out for? The first one, of course, is cover. So I'm going right to left here. Cover in 2024 for businesses, or wide cover for 2020 in 2024 for businesses, should be good hygiene. The cover is out there. And what the policy is trying to do in that instance is simply indemnify the client against the loss that they suffer. The middle silo you'll see here is in response. Cyber claims can become tremendously technical to respond to, and they need specialist response and individuals to do that, which I'll move on to further on in the presentation. So what does good in-house response look like, and what does an insurance policy give a buyer of that policy over and above just indemnification? And then finally, on the far left here, what additional services can buyers of insurance achieve in 2024 that sit around those core principles of insurance, such as indemnification and claim service? And it's a really key part of where the cyber insurance industry is heading, and I'll cover that in more detail as we go along. So just to quickly recap on those first couple of slides, I'm speaking from a point of 20 plus years claims experience, specifically in the cyberscape, across 90 territories, 130,000 clients, and 2,500 claims per year. And that's everything from your one-man bands up to your multi-billion-pound conglomerates, which you'll see day in, day out. The risk tends to be pretty similar throughout the lot, and the claims experience tends to be the same also. And then what we're trying to do in this slide is really simplify and demystify what we're talking about when we're speaking about cyber risk and cyber insurance. And that is, it's like any other line of insurance. It's trying to quantify what that financial loss may be, and what causes it is usually the downfall within the industry, and trying to explain that to the laymen and women on the street who are running a £5 million haulage business or a £150 million online retailer, and pointing out the areas of danger and risk. Just to hammer home the point, I want to sort of set the scene in terms of why cybercrime exists, and why criminals would target this area and pivot away from conventional large-scale crimes such as drug dealing or drug smuggling, people smuggling. If you can imagine a business's value in 2024, it's very rare that anyone's holding an awful lot of cash. And specifically in the UK, apart from this week, the weather is absolutely terrible. So if you were to become a criminal, would you want to put on a balaclava in Newcastle, as you can probably see with the accent, break into some premise and steal tables, chairs, TVs? Yeah, you might get some laptops, iPads, whatever it may be. That's fine. It's petty crime. That still obviously does exist, but it's not so serious that it's going to close a business overnight. When you reach the level of income that can be gained by cybercrime, the easiest way to do that is leverage and extort businesses for access back to their systems. These criminals sit in Russia, North Korea, Iran, predominantly. They aren't going to get extradited anywhere else globally, specifically with the current political landscape. And they target businesses purely generated for income. So cyber insurance is there to protect businesses against the threat of that cyber crime. And modern day, that cyber crime isn't carried out by individuals that are 16-year-old in the mum and dad's basement doing it for a little bit of fun. These individuals are well sophisticated. Some of them have websites with the faces on, contact email addresses. Sometimes when we converse with them, they have out of offices saying, I'm on annual leave, contact my boss. They have supply chains like we do in the insurance world also, but they are purely motivated by income. And the reason that they attack businesses in the UK, whether it turns over 100 grand or £1 billion, is because they can extort them for a significant amount of money. And that's what cyber insurance is there to do. Is there a need for it? We estimate 61% of SMEs, and we class SMEs anything under 250 million in revenue, and that would make up about 96% of UK businesses. We think 61% of them have experienced a cyber attack in one way or another. I personally think that figure is so undercooked, and the reason for that is cybercrime is tremendously underreported. And the analogy I always tell about this is, if I owned a manufacturing plant and it was a stressful Friday, and I decided to sneak a cigarette indoors, and I threw the cigarette butt in the bin on the way out, and the building burnt down. Even though it was my fault and I shouldn't have been smoking inside, the general consensus is, oh, he's a good lad, Joe. Stressful. It's been busy at work. You know, it can happen to the best of us, even though it shouldn't. Let's get a GoFundMe. If the insurance doesn't pay out, we'll have a GoFundMe and we'll get that business back on the feet. There's sympathy around the community, around sort of the supply chain, and even in the insurance industry. You suffer a loss due to a cyber event. So either someone's clicked on a link that they shouldn't, someone sent money somewhere that they shouldn't, and or people think that you should have been better risk managed. You are the devil as a business. And it really puts off people reporting that. So there's an awful lot that's swept underneath the carpet. So just to recap where we are after this slide, hopefully we've covered why cyber insurance exists in terms of the level of threat and a little bit about who that's from. And then, is it actually happening on a scale where there's an insurance product needed to fill that financial risk gap in the UK? And it certainly is there indeed. I believe it's on one of the slides after this. I think the cybercrime industry is going to be worth something like 8.5 trillion in the next couple of years. And that is primarily extorting businesses globally. So why would a criminal target an SME? I think we can probably all picture why they would target the NHS, or why they would target the post office. No cheering in the back there for the post office after the documentary, or Ferrari, or Ticketmaster, whoever it may be. When we turn on our TVs on a daily basis, someone else has become susceptible to that crime. But essentially, if you think about those that work in any sort of sales or have done in the past, if you're purely motivated by income, and for everyone on this call, that's legitimate income in the insurance industry, or something attached to the insurance industry, and you were starting your year and building a pipeline, typically what you would do is fill the top 5 and 10% with your Ticketmasters, post offices, Ferrari. And in your mind, you think, if I have one of those come off this year, I can put my feet up in July. Brilliant. That's my year done. And it might take 2 or 3 years for one of those to come off, but it's always in the back of your mind and you're chipping away. The vast majority of the work that you do and the income that you get is from your low-hanging fruit. And it's exactly the same with SMEs in the UK. If these criminal organisations, backed typically by governments or government software, can target large corporate entities that spend tens of millions of pounds on risk management every year and be successful, what chance has a £20 million haulier in the Northeast got? From a technical perspective, very little is the honest answer to that. So SMEs are targeted primarily because they are low-hanging fruit. And to lean on one of my analogies, if I park my little VW up next to a Ferrari in the middle of Newcastle and all the windows were down and I left the key in the ignition, the car thief walked past, they don't even try that Ferrari door handle. They don't even look at it. They see the keys in my ignition, they jump in and it's gone. And the reason for that is they're purely motivated by easy income. And it's the same across every criminal organisation, specifically in cyber. So when we look at the sort of 3 points on the screen here, cybersecurity defence, should SMEs and businesses in the UK put money towards risk management? Of course they should. And it should be a serious consideration to do so. But 75% of claims that we see at CFC come from some form of human error. And I'll move on to that in the next slide. In the middle, access to valuable information. Data and information doesn't have to be sensitive to be valuable to a business. And this is where COVID really changed cybercrime. It didn't change the frequency of it, although some people think it did, but it actually didn't. There's enough work for cyber criminals to go after it. They aren't sitting around thinking, oh God, everyone's working from home now, there's more opportunity. That isn't the case. They have been working at full capacity since day dot. The reason COVID changed cybercrime and cyber vulnerability is it dragged businesses forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years plus in some cases in terms of their technology stance and their reliance on technology. So if you think of any business, no matter which sector, and the question you ask here is what would happen if you didn't have access to your systems first thing on a Monday morning and a Russian threat group were calling you constantly saying they're going to tell your supply chain and your employees, how long would you last? Probably is not long. Even if that data wasn't bank details, or even if it wasn't medical details, the fact that you can't access your operational data is enough to cause panic in businesses, and cyber criminals leverage that tremendously. And then finally, on the far right, gateways to larger businesses. We're so interlinked now in modern day. We send stuff to each other constantly. We often send stuff where we shouldn't. I think probably everyone on the call has had that moment where they walk away to make a coffee and stand making a coffee and went, oh my Lord, I've sent it to the wrong Chris or whoever it may be. We're so interlinked now as a business, and not just interlinked in terms of email, but interlinked in terms of systems that we use. So an awful lot of outsourcing of our IT, etc. So just to give an insight and just to hammer home this point, SMEs and businesses, or predominantly the vast majority of businesses in the UK, are seen as low risk and high reward for cyber criminals. So that's the why behind it. How do they do it? Now, they do it in three main ways. The first one is ransomware. Now, this is the one that typically hits the news, and that's because it is by far and away the most severe. And what cyber criminals are trying to do here is they're trying to install a piece of software or malware onto a business's system that they can essentially lock that business out from using it. And they do that over a period of time. Typically, as I mentioned, it's through someone clicking a link. And unfortunately, with cybercrime and cyber vulnerability, if someone clicks a link, the red light doesn't go off, the sirens don't go off immediately. It can be weeks, months, whatever it may be, until they feel like they've got enough IT control and power in that system, and they lock a business out, and they demand a ransom for that business to have access back to them. The second one is more aligned to traditional crime, and that's theft of funds. I think we can all imagine this because we do it personally. It's typically where people are socially engineered into transferring money where they shouldn't. So a prime example of that is an accountant for a business receives a call from the FD, but of course it's not the FD. It's someone pretending to be that, or it may be an email or whatever it may be, but essentially socially engineered to transfer funds where they shouldn't. And or it can be done by threat groups sitting in the inbox of someone in the finance department, which is tremendously frequent. And they watch invoices, etc., coming in and out, and they can change the bank details on those invoices at the drop of a hat, a seconds it takes. And people start transferring money where they shouldn't. So when we're looking at those two, before I move on to data breach, ransomware is by far and away the most severe, enough to close a business. Theft of funds is by far and away the most frequent, but is becoming severe enough to leave a large hole in a business's pocket. Within the insurance market, not CFC, thankfully, there's recently been over a £2 million loss when someone's transferred £2 million somewhere where they shouldn't have, unfortunately, through social engineering. And it happens on various different scales, and it can have a detrimental impact to businesses on various levels. So if you think of construction, for example, when I was on the broking side, if I discussed cyber insurance to constructors, purely going down the ransomware route, the usual retort would be, I can get my staff on a building site tomorrow, Joe. I'll ring them and they'll be there. They're going to keep building. Okay, I take your point on that. Fine. What would you do if you were playing your supplier in a very cash flow sensitive industry and that money went missing? Where would that leave you in terms of finishing the job? Actually, that is an area of concern for us. Finally, when we look at data breach, it's becoming ever more popular. Again, because regulations tightening in terms of what data should look like and how we should manage that, but also criminals have learned they can leverage that. So if you tie data breach in with ransomware more often than not, so business is held to ransom and they go, it's okay, Mr. or Mrs. Criminal. I have great access to IT. I've got fantastic backups, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to pay you. We'll be back operating within a month. Usually the conversation then turns to, well, that's fine, but we're stolen your data and the data that we're stolen relates to X. So even if you're back functioning as a business, we'll release this data in a slow and steady and meaningful manner unless you pay us that ransom. And data breach again, but when you're looking at all businesses, and I mentioned sort of after COVID, people think private and sensitive data has to be medical records, etc. But if you think yourself as in any organization and your payroll was going to be leaked, so every single person in that organization could see what each other were being paid, emails going from each other were going to be leaked in terms of have you been calling suppliers, etc. And or they found out who your suppliers and your supply chain is and your clients, and they're going to notify them that they've got emails in between. The losses in the trust quickly add up within those circumstances. So you can see where the criminals get leverage from. It's not as simple as I've been held ransom, I can get back online, I'm not going to pay you. They find different ways to leverage that client. And actually, they are often very polite in this process. But one thing that they do tremendously well is time pressure. They time pressure tremendously well. So businesses aren't sitting around going, I've been held to ransom. I'll have to think about what I can do over the course of a week. Those criminals are on the phone from minute one, every hour, every day, saying that they're going to tell the supply chain unless they make a decision, and or employees. So that's a method that they use. Just to quickly recap here, ransomware by far and away the most severe, and I'll run through where the actual losses arise. Theft of funds, I think that's the most tangible. We can sort of see that in our everyday life. And then data breach. And the thing with data breach is it doesn't always have to be tremendously sensitive data to have value. But of course, businesses do hold that sensitive data more often than not in 2024. In terms of the impact, where does the losses arise when these things happen? When you look at ransomware and data breach, actually, in an awful lot of cases, predominantly the cost, specifically for ransomware, is about 95% first-party loss. So try and move away from the idea that cybercrime and its impact is essentially like a third-party loss where you have to notify people and whatever it may be. That certainly does happen. But if we think, for example, if I go back to my manufacturing example, one of the largest claims we had at CFC was a small, when I say smaller, I mean in terms of what we insure, manufacturer, who've just taken on a whole host of future revenue. Through COVID, they put all their drawings online, and they weren't actually manufacturing or engineering anything secretive, but they'd moved into the modern world. They didn't back it up, and they suffered a loss, and that data got deleted. So for them, where did that loss arise? So first of all, they had to understand what data had been seen or stolen. So you have data forensics. The individuals that can do that are extortionately expensive. It's a very time-consuming and niche thing to be able to do. They had loss of revenue. They couldn't trade, so they had no instant trading. So from day one, every minute that went by, they were losing revenue in terms of what they were taking. They had a PR cost in that. They'd just taken on some very large contracts. How do you manage PR so you don't lose those contracts? Unfortunately, they did end up losing those contracts, not through the PR element, but simply they couldn't fulfill them from a time perspective. So they had future loss of revenue, and it was devastating loss of future revenue in that. Then you had the legal implications in terms of taking advice. Who do you need to notify? When do you need to notify? And what should that look like? And then you have the system rebuild. So how do you get back to the point that you were before? And then finally, you had data recreation. So I'll move on to this in some of the points that I make in terms of what looks good in the cyber policy. But to recreate that data that was online, that they built up over 20 years and moved online, is an extortionately expensive thing to do. And that's what a cyber policy is there to do. So think about cyber policies much more akin to like a material damage BI policy than a traditional third-party added on, tagged on policy. And again, I make no apologies for repeating this question. If you were a victim of ransom, first thing on a Monday morning, 9 a.m., from a very sophisticated criminal group, what would you do? And how long would you last without any access to any of your systems at all? The answer to that is not very long. And the losses build up tremendously quickly in that. So that's ransomware. When we look at theft of funds, I've mentioned it's really tangible, isn't it? You know, how much can you lose when we're talking about theft of funds, well, how much do you transfer in any one go? How frequent is that? And how long will it take you to realize that you're transferring money where you shouldn't? Add them all together, you can come up with some sort of matrix to go, yes, actually, that will be quite a lot. And then when we're talking about data breach, if we just pivot to the worst case scenario here, and you had to notify 1,000 records or 10,000 records. So if you think of an insurance brokerage, for example, we like to hold records. We never kill records off. And that list will be given to someone in 10 years' time to prospect. If you had to notify them, say 10,000 records, the law usually states how you have to notify them. And sometimes that can be by first-class stamp and envelope. If you think of how much a first-class stamp is today, and you've got to do that 10,000 times, just as a physical cost for a first-class stamp, it's expensive. It's tremendously expensive. And that's before you even consider what you're paying for legal, data forensics, etc. The losses in cyber events add up quickly, really quickly. And this is why I'm so passionate about it being on the top of a risk manager's agenda, no matter which sector or size of business that they sit in, because we see it constantly day in, day out at CFC, where businesses are on the phone in tears that they're going to have to close because they don't have any insurance, or B, thankfully they do have insurance, but that time period of being held to ransom or being leveraged against is so stressful. The directors are often also in bits. And I know those on the call will deal with insurance claims, varying in degrees of severity across different lines of insurance. You can imagine what it's like. But I think crime and theft are up there with some of the worst. So in the next sort of 15, 20 minutes, I'm going to look in terms of what should you look for in a cyber policy. So hopefully I've outlined in terms of the risk of cyber criminals, where losses arise for businesses. What I'm going to go through is obviously very CFC focused, but please don't take this as a sales pitch because it's not. It's more just to sort of give you an idea of what's available for a business when they buy an insurance policy in the cyberspace in modern day. And I'll point out things rather that you should look out for in terms of the cover that's available, in terms of the additional services, why they're so important. And then I'll finish up on some of the resources that you can take away and use, including our BIBA guide. So you'll see everything's branded CFC. If I sort of slip into that speaking from a CFC perspective, just ignore me. It's not a sales pitch. It's just that's what I'm used to doing, obviously where I sit. So as I mentioned, think about cyber insurance in 3 pillars. What's there for cover? I would say cyber insurance has an unfair tag attached to it in terms of, well, even if it does happen, they're not going to pay out. Cyber insurance is a line of insurance. It's one of the highest claims pay rates across all product lines. So the cover is out there. But some areas that you should take note of and be careful of. I'm going to start in the top right. When you're issuing cybercrime or looking to procure cybercrime for your clients or anyone in your ecosystem, just make sure that there isn't any warranties and exclusions on there that may hinder what that cover's there to do. And typically what we see in the market is we'll see exclusions for social engineering, for example. So if someone called me as an accountant and says, hi, I'm the FD or I'm one of your clients, we're changing our bank details, please transfer money to this, and I'd done it, that would be excluded in some cases. And also, if I was looking to proactively transfer money somewhere and I didn't ring ahead and say, just to confirm this is your bank details, quite often we see those warranties and subjectivities in there as well. What we do at CFC is there isn't any of that at all. And our stance of that is because we know if someone isn't going to be socially engineered and or they ring ahead every single time that they transfer money, the likelihood of having a claim is very low. So if you're not being social engineered and you're not transferring money where you shouldn't, there's probably no need for the cover. But we know human error accounts for the vast majority of this type of stuff. We do transfer money where we shouldn't. We don't ring ahead. We don't follow risk protocol. It's almost like a fleet insurer saying, well, you know, if you break in time, we'll cover you. But if you don't break in time, then we'll not. Yeah, that's why I'm buying the insurance. So have a little look at that in policies. Unlimited reinstatements. When you're comparing and contrasting levels of indemnity, unlimited reinstatements, specifically from ourselves, is still out there. I don't need to run over that too much. I'm sure everyone on the call is au fait to what that looks like. BI periods. I mentioned that cyber claims are often tremendously technical, and hopefully you've got a feel for that and why that is. 12 months should be pretty standard in the market now. So have a look in terms of BI periods, in terms of loss of revenue and everything that goes with that. And then access to incident response. To get the guys and girls that are equipped from a technical perspective to respond to cyber claims, they are expensive. They're not cheap like me on the insurance side. They have a really strict, long tenured set of skills to be able to deal with these criminals. At CFC, we split that limit out into a separate tower, which essentially means that when the limit gets eaten up by that technical response, because it's in our benefit as well, to reduce our claims cost, the client isn't at detriment where it's eaten up the limit where we can't pay stuff for loss of revenue, system rebuild, all the stuff that the policy is designed to do. So just because we're benefiting off really highly expertise technical response shouldn't mean that the client should be at detriment. So we split that limit out in there as well. So hopefully that just gives you an idea in terms of cover. I would say cover in the cyber insurance world is the least interesting part of it. I find the criminals absolutely fascinating in the service that sit around it, and why and how and where the loss arises. Much more interesting, but I have to touch on this because it's a key part of insurance. The second one of that is response, and I'm going to touch on a little bit more about who the cyber criminals are in this element, and how do we respond to those individuals. So as you can see, working for a really technical business, proactive hasn't spelled correctly or dragged through on the top there, but that's meant to say proactive response. And essentially what we mean by that is, how should insurers be built in the cyber landscape in modern day to combat the threat that has a beneficial outcome for insureds? Now, I'm going to go through CFC lens because that's what I know, and I know this is what we do. But just to give you an idea of the level that we take it in terms of how important response is. So I mentioned there's over 900 of us. 140 plus of us aren't client-facing in insurance. The pure day job, day in, day out, is either to prevent cyber attacks across our client book, i.e. insureds, or respond to cyber incidents. The people that are sitting within those teams are technical individuals. And I would say many of you will have LinkedIn. Follow the individuals that I will mention. The really big stalwarts in the industry. So we have people like Bob Scott Kern, who was head of cyber at the National Crime Agency. He heads up a team in there. Fantastic individual. Tom Bennett used to get wheeled out by MI5 and MI6 into foreign agents' houses to install cameras or take data off laptops. Tom heads up our proactive team in there. Martin Hyde, traditionally military in terms of cyber, moved in and headed up Deloitte's cyber proposition. Martin, CEO of our response. And the 140 guys and girls that sit in there tend to be long tenured cybersecurity individuals. And the reason that's really important is, if you were having a cyber incident as a broker, as an insured, would you want to get through in that traditional insury way of, is it covered, is it not covered? Well, we'll have to see what happens. Or I've got someone on the phone, what should I do with them? I don't know, it's Saturday, we'll come back to you Monday. It doesn't work. What works, and if you think about this like a fire service in terms of traditional insurance policies, the fire service has to turn up at that moment in time, and it has to be from someone that can start to triage that claim. And where that adds value to us as an insurer is we can stop the claim escalating as quickly as possible. So again, like fire, the longer these claims drag on in terms of the threat actors are about in systems or transferring money, the more costly, of course, that it is, or stealing data. So we respond in under 15 minutes, 24/7, 365 days a year across globally. And the way that works is, you push a button on a mobile phone. If you're the insured, it gets straight through to one of these team. It's not me going, sorry to hear you're having a claim. I'm not quite sure what to do with this Russian group because I don't have the technical skills to do it. Although I do work at CFC. I'll put you in touch with Bob and we'll come back Monday. No, you're straight through to a technical response. And what do they do? I've mentioned in terms of contain, but they investigate. And the benefit that they bring in investigation is if a client is thinking about paying a ransom, what typically goes into that decision? It could be stuff like, we deal with this threat group day in, day out. If you pay them, you're probably going to get your data back and your systems back. Or we've never really heard of them before. You're taking a chance if you pay that ransom. Could be, we don't think that they have the data that they're saying that they have. Surprise, surprise, criminals like to lie and say that they have everything. Actually, from our data forensics, we don't think that they have. And we'll walk down that ransom and or buy time by walking down that ransom demand until we get the business back up and running. We can advise things like you can be back up and running, fully functional in 2 weeks. We see this day in, day out. We can hold your hand and or your IT provider's hand through this, and we can go from there. Even if you wanted to pay the ransom, you can't because they're on a US or UK or another country's banned list. So you literally can't pay them even if you wanted to, because that is a massive D&O risk going forward, and we would rag rate that indeed. Even down to, yes, I do want to pay CFC, unfortunately, through gritted teeth. How do I obtain £1 million worth of Bitcoin? I don't know. They don't take check and they don't take pounds. You can't just transfer the money, unfortunately. We have had incidences, just again to tell a tale, just to give you an idea of how convoluted the cybercrime sphere is, where businesses have decided to pay a ransom through gritted teeth. No business ever gleefully pays a ransom. And we should always remember those businesses are victims of crime. They are the victims. So if they decide to pay a ransom, there's probably a good reason for that. And I'll give some analogies on why that might take place in a moment. But we've had it where businesses went to pay a ransom, and in good faith, the criminals have tried to get the systems back up and running. It's not a case of you put in a password and everything's back to normal an hour later. This can still take weeks and weeks and weeks to decrypt all the data. And something went wrong and we couldn't quite work out what it was. So the cyber criminal, in very good conscience, joined a Teams call with ourselves, their victim that they are extorting, and their face was on a Teams call just like I am now. And they sat on a Teams call for an hour and a half. And the benefit we added there was we had to contain this cyber criminal by letting them back into certain parts of that network. The benefit that we brought was essentially the end client couldn't have done that without that technical expertise and that level of technical expertise. We managed to get that business back online in an awful lot quicker time period than we would if we couldn't engage with criminals in that way. Now, for me, I can even feel that sort of anger inside of me. You know, they do have a cheek turning up on Zoom calls, but it goes back to my original point. They're not going to be extradited anyway. They don't really have any fear in terms of what they're doing. And in terms of recovery, what I would say is response from an insurer in this instance is really different to IT technical response. IT services providers are there to provide IT services. And of course, within response, we would liaise with them, you know, very well, but they aren't there to deal with ransom negotiations and or deal with everything that I've just outlined. And we can tend to recover systems an awful lot quicker because we do it day in, day out than they probably can. So it's not a case of shutting the IT individual out. That is never the case. They know the systems an awful lot better. It would be like turning up to a fire, to use the fire analogy again, and the family standing outside, but the dog's locked in a room somewhere, and the firefighter not even asking the family, you know, how do you get to the room? Is it downstairs, upstairs, and just running in? So if you think about it in that context, if we turn up to the fire, we're going to want to know the landscape in terms of IT. But that's what we're trying to do in terms of response. The benefit for you that works one step away from end client within insurance broking, maybe, is that if someone calls you last thing on a Friday or first thing on a Monday or over Christmas holidays, school holidays, and this is where these sort of types of crimes usually take place, you know for a fine fact that's been triaged tremendously quickly. You're not sat for a weekend going, oh my Lord, this is absolutely horrendous. I don't know where to turn. There's no one in CFC picking up the phone. And that's why it's so important. Of course, this is driven because it saves our book, saves our claims experience and claims expense. The benefit of that is those clients that are insured by an insurance policy now benefit from that technical expertise. To give you an idea in terms of cost of this, if you were to procure this as a business in the open market, this level of response, just as a retainer, before you even used any of the response, I would predict that would be well over 6 figures. And that's just to even have access to it. That's before you start getting billed for whatever that individual's doing. So that pushes back on when cyber insurance looks a little bit expensive. Not so much now in the softening market, but that's the sort of level of additional service that you're getting around the policy now. And then finally, proactive. What is a client getting when they're buying an insurance policy that is risk management led in terms of protecting them against those claims that I mentioned? As you can see on screen, this is how we do it at CFC. We are market leaders in this. So when I say risk management, you can take this as what the pinnacle looks like. And I stress that this is included. If you're a one-man band or a £10 billion turnover business, it's included within your insurance policy. And we do it through 4 main ways. We use real-life claims data. I go back to that first slide. I promise you it wasn't a humble brag. We take all that claims data over all those years, and we monitor claims in recent times. Not every cyber exposure is a risk that needs action. There's hundreds of thousands of cyber exposures that are out there. Criminals tend to hone in on 1 or 2 or 3, and that's what they go for a period of 2-3 months. It's our job as an insurer to spot that really quickly and start to notify all our clients that may be exposed to that. In the bottom right, we have vulnerability scanning, and that scanning is essentially scanning all of the client-facing assets of a business. This is a sort of technical element of it. What we're doing here is scanning a business to say, have you left the door open on one of your devices where cybercriminal may take advantage of that? Yes, I have. Right, we'll hold your hand to close it. That's what we're doing in the bottom right. Bottom left, this is where we get a bit niche. We are the biggest consumers of data from MI5, MI6, and this is Tom Bennett's team here. And we pass anonymized data back. Now, criminals build pipelines of victims. They again, if you think about it very much like in our world, for anyone that's worked in sales, they pipeline you. So they'll send out a prospecting letter. So to make businesses or someone in the business click on stuff, you'll then go in an additional pile in terms of, yes, those businesses have clicked on stuff, they have that vulnerability, and then you go in another pile to say that's been actioned, and eventually you're going to get held to ransom. But to be able to go back to where they've been before, they leave a marker on that system, and each marker is different. If you think about it like a red flashing beacon, maybe, or a blue flashing beacon, or a cross, or whatever it may be, and we proactively look across all our 130,000 clients for those markers. So they've had a breach and they're going to directly have a claim within a matter of days, weeks, or months. We can hold the hand to navigate that. And that comes from data that we build up either internally and or third party. And then finally, threat intelligence. This is just pure threat intelligence. To give you an example of this, we had a client whose IT director logged onto his personal laptop while away on holiday. It was actually his personal laptop that was breached, but his work credentials were stolen. Obviously, should have known better. Those credentials were sold on the dark web for $10,000. Of course, no one buys those credentials for $10,000 if they aren't going to use them. Through threat intelligence, an agency, a crime agency, contacted Tom and his team and said, we know that this is one of your insureds and I'm making these numbers up, but this is how the conversation went. 1:05 on Friday afternoon, Joe Tracy, IT director, had his credentials stolen off this laptop. This is a website that they were sold on. This is who's bought it. And here's a list of all the conversation on the dark web forums when they're going to use it. Can you reach out to them and prevent that from happening? And that's what we've done. So that's how niche that we're getting. And every business has access to this. I'm going to use one of my analogies just to outline how you may remember this. It falls down, so do bear with me in this analogy, and apologies to those that have heard this before. If you were buying this proactive service through your home insurer, that's right, home insurer, this is what it would sort of look like. Joe, judging from our claims data, this house in the northeast, in the area that you've bought it, with those risk management in terms of locks and window locks, etc., we think you're pretty vulnerable. Can we hold your hand to come out and we'll do it free of charge to change the locks on your doors, etc.? We're not saying that there is going to be a claim next week, but we're saying that people are really leveraging those locks. So if there is cybercrime, if there is a burglar about, your house is probably on that list. Quite apt for living in the northeast, actually. Bottom right, vulnerability scanning. They've sent security guards out to my street while I'm at work, and they patrol during the day. And they try the doors and the windows just to make sure everything's good. And I get a phone call, Joe, you're an absolute idiot. You've left the back door open again. We can't see any burglars about. Don't rush. We're going to stand here till you come back home. But we know if you keep leaving this back door open, you're going to have a claim. A burglar eventually is going to find a way into their house, but we're not saying it's tomorrow. You know, could be 6 months' time or whatever it may be. Come home and lock the door. Be a good lad. Bottom left-hand corner, threat hunting. This is the same security guards on a night, and they're shining a UV light on everyone's front door. And unfortunately, my door's got a massive X on it. And they know through claims data, the doors that have a massive X on them suffer a claim within a week, and they usually go in through the garage. The burglar usually goes into the garage. So we work very closely as a home insurer to bolster the garage, make sure all the lights are on over the next course of the week, and actually scrub the X off the front door so that burglar can't find his way back. We're in the clear. What we're doing there is physically stopping loss. So it's moved from risk management, we may be stopping loss, into we are stopping definite loss now on this left-hand side. And then top left, this is where the analogy really falls down. The home insurer contacts me and says, Joe, we've cracked a criminal gang. Unfortunately, your name and your house address is on there. You're going to get burgled at 2:30 a.m. Tuesday morning, and they've found a weakness in those double patio doors out the back. That is the way that they're going to go in. They've profiled you, and your wife's left them open on purpose. Sorry to tell you, but you're going to have to do something about that. We'll be round in a moment, and we'll make sure it's secure, all the lights on, but we can tell you directly at 2:30 on Tuesday morning, you're going to have an attempted burglary because you're on that list. And that's what we're doing. If I could relate in a poor analogy, in the physical world to the cyber world, that is what we're doing for every client. And as you can see on the right-hand side, how is this relevant to insureds? What does it actually look like? They can contact both the proactive team, and the proactive team can contact them through downloading the app. Essentially, it's a communication gateway. They can send phishing emails to all their employees through the app as well. So they can go, yep, you've been a naughty boy or girl today. We've told you to stop clicking those links. Here's some training. But most importantly, they can ask questions to those teams. Like, for example, I'm thinking about upgrading this piece of risk management. What does it look like in terms of across your insureds? And the answer to that might be, I wouldn't bother. It's outdated already. Or yes, that's a good idea. We can point you in the right direction. Or have you thought about X and Y? But in reverse, it allows us to contact those clients where we think or know that they're going to have a claim. We never over-notify. We hope a policyholder goes through a period where we don't notify them. It's not like a marketing tool. It's a really sophisticated tool to enable insureds that aren't tech savvy to make sense of what we're doing behind the scenes. And finally, as you can imagine, many business continuity plans in business fall down very quickly, specifically when it comes to cyber. And the reason for that is all the insurance documents, the business continuity plan, everything is typically held online. And what's the first thing that goes down when you have a cyber incident? It's held online. They don't even know who to call, or don't know how to call, or where to call. They can use the app at the touch of a button 24/7 to get through to that technical response team. And we don't penalise for over-notification. We would much rather someone use the app to notify us and it turn out to be nothing because we caught it either really quick or it just turn out to be nothing, than not notify us at all. So just to round up, when you're looking for cyber insurance or cyber risk or considering cyber risk, experience within the cyber insurance is really important. And hopefully that sort of hit home in terms of especially those additional services that sit around it. Technical response is a must away from legally led response in cyber. What does that response team look like if one of my clients or me myself are going to have a claim? And do they provide any risk management that sit around that? There isn't a more economical way for businesses to buy access to technical response and or risk management than through an insurance policy. It doesn't exist. I've mentioned, so if you even just take away the proactive side of things, just have access to that technical response can run into six figures in terms of that level of technical response and the partners that sit behind CFC as well. And then when you add in that level of risk management on the front end, yeah, for an awful lot of businesses, that wouldn't be economical to procure. And of course, they don't have the relationships with those intelligence agencies or whatnot. What does the market look like? Hopefully, I'll give you an idea of risk. We must mention the market in terms of how do you access it. I mean, from our standpoint, the market softened quite drastically, but you can actually obtain a premium, a bindable premium now by using simply a website address for businesses under 50 million in revenue, up to 300 employees across a vast majority of sectors with no subjectivity. So it's available now to say this is your bindable premium, and there isn't anything hovering over here such as minimum risk requirements. You can actually obtain it using simply the website address. And we do that for every website that's put through our Connect platform. We take 200 to 8,000 data points. The benefit to those brokers on the line is we don't have to deal with those horrendous 18-page IT-led questionnaires anymore. When I was on the broking side, I once got asked a question going, Joe, do you know what this question even means? I said no. The IT director said no. And I went back to the underwriter at the time, and it wasn't CFC. And I went, are you actually going to rate off this question? And like, yeah, I don't really know what it is either. It's been there sort of 5-10 years. So just a little anecdote. I get the pain of those bloody proposal forms. Sometimes they can't be helped, but trading cyber insurance now is so much easier than it used to. There isn't a better time to sell or talk or be in cyber insurance or insure yourself against cyber insurance than modern day right here, right now. The market's soft, the cost of procuring a cyber insurance is low, the risk is there, it's on TV every single day, day in, day out. Legislation's moving towards consideration of that risk. It's been spoken about in terms of contracts, a little bit like PI used to be, that's just become standard. Cyber's there as well. The more people that experience, unfortunately, a cyber loss, the more businesses are speaking around it. It's moving in that D&O area risk. Is an FD brave enough, if they have cyber risk explained to them, like we have done today, to go, actually, I'll sign that off. I'll take that chance. And actually, the products are out there. And I know I've spoken about CFC. There's many good providers of cyber insurance out there. Some really, really neat things that they're doing. The products out there, the covers out there, the services are out there. The market's out there, the capacity's out there, but actually, most importantly, the risk is there. We're not trying to hit square peg into a round hole. I think I got that right. As I mentioned, 61% of businesses have suffered a loss, and that is underestimated, we think. And yet, 9 out of 10 businesses in the UK don't have a standalone cyber policy. It's up in terms of the size of the risk in modern day into financial cover. There's not another line of insurance that warily has that gap, and that's going to be filled by two things: either the market comes towards, the insureds come towards the market, or the market's going to be pushed onto the insureds through legislation because the risk is just so vast. Finally, I mentioned CFC's website. Please head towards it. We have some really good guides. Everything that I spoke about today can be found in our cyber guide in conjunction with Bieber. We have ransomware calculators where you can type a business, whether it's yours or a client's business, into there, and we'll take all our claims data, give you a low, median, high estimate in terms of that loss, and point where that loss comes from our own data. And we have an abundance of case studies articles from some really cool people across CFC and beyond, and what they sort of see day in, day out. So people like Tom Bennett, Martin Hyde, James Burns, Lindsay Nelson, real leaders within the cyber insurance industry. You can find an awful lot of articles on them as well. And of course, we do other product lines, so please consider us for them. And I will open it up to any questions if anyone has it for the last 5 minutes or so.
If you don't want to shout out and you'd prefer to put it in the chat, then feel free to also do that.
Never know whether this is a good thing or not, do you?
We'll just give it a couple more, sort of 30 seconds or so. So insightful, Joe. Maybe you've explained it so well, no one's got any questions.
More like everyone's off for a cup of tea, I think.
Yeah, or hungry for the lunch now.
Indeed.
All right. Well, let's wrap up then. I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. So as chair of the CPD committee. Oh, hold on, we've got a question. If someone didn't react to notification, would that invalidate any future claim for that particular risk?
Really good question. I've never known it happen. It would be a conversation in a really extreme example. So, if again, I'm going to go back to an analogy. The reason it doesn't happen is if you were a fleet insurer and someone's just had a crash in an insured, and then you go to them, by the way, all your brakes are cut on the rest of your fleet, don't jump in it. Quite naturally, they go and get them fixed. They don't jump in them and drive them. And it's exactly the same in the cyber world, where you go, you are going to have a claim. Here's the proof. Can we hold your hand to do that? And because it's free of charge for us to hold their hand and do that from an IT perspective, and there's no expense, we've never come across a case where someone goes, well, actually, I'm all right. I'll just have a claim. Would there ever be a situation, answer the question directly, that if we notified someone of an exposure, we had the conversation, we had their broker within that room in the conversation, in 6, 9, 10 months, they were still pushing back, we might say, look, we're offering to do this free of charge for our technical expertise. We know it is a risk. Why they're going to cut that? If a claim does arise in that specific area, we'll cut that out and we'll still provide technical response, but maybe not indemnification. But it's a really good question. But I've never known it happen. I'd say I've seen across 2,500 claims a year.
Brilliant, thank you. And thanks, Kay, for your question. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Kay.
Okay, so as chair of the CPD committee on behalf of the Insurance Institute of Manchester, Joe, thank you for taking time to present to our members today and for sharing your knowledge and insight, especially the cost of first-class stamps. It is worrying yet fast to see how easily businesses are targeted, and great to understand how businesses can protect themselves. And to all members joining today, thank you. We hope you found it informative. Following today's call, there will be a short survey to complete. Your feedback is appreciated to ensure that we can meet expectations of our members in the future. And yeah, enjoy your lunch and have a great day.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.